Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 5th, 2017 Informal County Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. We have a proclamation to present. If I could have Mr. Joseph Chapman, Rita Ewing, and Pastor James Hill to come forward, please. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. I have a proclamation from the county mayor that I'd like to read. Whereas suicide is one of the most disruptive and tragic events a family and a community can experience, with more than 950 lives lost in Tennessee each year, and an estimated 8 to 25 attempted suicide for each suicide death. And whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of all deaths in Tennessee and the second leading cause of death among people from ages 15 to 24. Whereas Tennessee veterans, active duty military personnel, and National Guardsmen face a risk as compared to the general population of Tennessee, with more dying from suicide than combat. Whereas public awareness of this terrifying problem is the key to preventing further suffering and loss of life, and the risk for human self-destruction can be reduced through awareness, education, and treatment, as the highest risk for suicide is among the survivors of those who died by suicide or those who have attempted suicide. And whereas suicide prevention has been declared a national priority by the President and Congress, and Tennessee declares suicide prevention as a state priority, and the legislature, in partnership with TSPN, implements the Tennessee strategies for suicide prevention based on the national strategy for suicide prevention. And where Tennessee is a national leader in the effort to prevent suicide, being one of the first states to develop a suicide prevention and evaluation plan covering the lifespan. And whereas the governor of Tennessee has appointed a suicide prevention network advisory council to coordinate the implementation of the Tennessee strategy for suicide prevention, and whereas the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network is a grassroots I know this word and I just can't say it. Collaboration of Tennesseans and organizations working to eliminate the stigma of suicide, educate the community about the warning signs of suicide, and ultimately reduce the rate of suicide in our state. And whereas the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network is also committed to excellence in suicide prevention, intervention, and post-intervention. Now, therefore, I, Jim Durrett, Mayor of Montgomery County, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim September 2017 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Montgomery County, Tennessee, and urge all our citizens to work to prevent suicide and to raise awareness and tolerance around all people affected by this tragedy. Gentlemen, thank you for your work. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. I think she wants to take a picture. Y'all come up here. All right, at this time, I'll call on Commissioner Hodges for an update on the Airport Liaison Committee.
Yeah, not too much to report. We had Rob Salome was the newest member added to the Airport Authority. They have a bid opening for a runway overlay on August the 20th. We had a record number of people at the airport for the solar eclipse. Which is obviously great for the airport, and that's pretty much it for the airport.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Genius, anything from school liaison?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a real quickie. Again, they had a couple of informal meetings and then their formal meetings. They continued to have briefings and PowerPoints on teacher retention and, of course, teacher continuing education. They did discuss computer issue to the high school students and how that was flowing along for the middle school and the other schools. They did have their monthly internal evaluation of departmental components as to ensure that they meet all the requirements and continuing to maintain proficiency in all areas. There was a quick discussion on CMCSS student scores with the state tests and stuff like this, and very proud of the outstanding job that our students are doing, and of course the teachers, the parents, and everybody, administrators, and the staff, that everything goes together and that it's a teamwork effort. And that was really the gist of their meetings.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up. Yes, sir.
Just one more thing, I'm sorry, but they also are advertising a fly on the Ford. It's basically an old airplane, and that'll be from October 5th through the 8th at the airport. And tickets are $70 if you order them online, $50 for kids 17 and under, and $75 for walk-up pricing. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up are our zoning cases. Dr. Ripple, our first case is CZ 12, 2017, application of KMG Properties, Rex Hawkins from C5 to R4.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. First case is the application of KMG Properties, represented by Rex Hawkins. They are proposing a rezoning of a little over 8 acres on the east side of Rollo Lane to the north of Rossview Road. The present zoning is C5. This is a land extensive commercial use, such as motor vehicle sales, construction equipment sales, mobile home sales, self-storage, truck terminals, as well as the typical C2 uses that would also include warehouses and wholesalers. The R4 district in the county is different from the city. In the city, it allows apartments only. In the county, it is all residential uses from single family through apartments. And a little bit of background history. In April 2002, the Industrial Development Board purchased the land in the South Park Industrial Land Area. In May of 2003, an industrial park development plan was prepared. In June of 2005, the Pressler Farm to the east was rezoned R1 with a 1,200-foot C5 strip as a buffer between the residential and the industrial park. In January of 2012, an amendment was made to the zoning ordinance to remove vacation trailer parks from the C5 district. And in January of 2012, October, 2012, the growth plan was amended in the planned growth area, which is the industrial park area, and to the east to allow R4 apartment uses. In December of 2012, KMG Properties rezoned to R4 the eastern portion of their property, leaving about a 500-foot C5 buffer next to the industrial park. The only comment from agencies was from the school system, which indicated that the Rossview schools were over 95% capacity. The Planning Commission staff recommended against the rezoning because the Planning Commission staff believes that apartments or single-family use next to heavy industrial M2 that goes bang and boom in the night is not appropriate. And the Planning Commission cannot guarantee what may or may not go in the M2 district or what may go in the R4, whether it's apartments or single-family homes. The Planning Commission, finally at the public hearing, Stanley Ross spoke on behalf of KMG. Rex Hawkins also spoke in favor of the rezoning. Mike Evans spoke in opposition to the rezoning, and the Planning Commission, of a split vote, 5-3, voted in favor of the rezoning. That's Rollo Lane. And that's the subject property again. Are there any questions of me?
Any questions of Dr. Ribble? Dr. Ribble, I think I'll let you go ahead. Commissioner Albert.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm sort of confused about the request for a zone change when there was a legal document signed with parties involved that they would not come back and ask for a zone change. So to me, this is a legal battle, not a zoning change case.
The Planning Commission is not party to any deed restrictions or private development agreements. We cannot consider those in the rezoning process nor the recommendations to this body. So you may duly consider it, but the property owner has a right to apply for rezoning. The agreements, private agreements, can always be amended, and that's not within the control of the zoning process.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jason Hodges.
So all the other R1s that I see there that are lined up to M2, why were they approved?
To the east or immediately on Rollo Lane to the north? Mm-hmm. That was pre-existing. That's a very old subdivision that long pre-existed before the land was even purchased for the industrial park.
So those won't make a difference in anything that we're trying to prevent?
Those are already occupied lots for 20+ years for residential homes, so it's an already developed area. And the R1 that you see on the east side of Rollo Lane to the north was not involved in any of the rezoning cases.
I guess what I'm asking is why if we already have R1 there, would a little bit more, how would a little bit more hurt if it's already there?
From a staff perspective, Planning Commission staff perspective, single family uses are inappropriate next to heavy industrial uses, period.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. It's already there, so I guess that's just.
Well, there were options at that point in time. It's private property. If you wanted it other than R1, then somebody has to purchase the property.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question, Dr. Ripple. Drilling down a little bit on what you said about the agreement. So you saying an agreement, a private agreement, is a unilateral agreement rather than a bilateral?
No, I'm saying that government, meaning the Planning Commission and this body, is not party to that agreement. We cannot enforce that agreement. We cannot enforce deed restrictions that may be placed on the industrial park. That's strictly between the landowners and the Industrial Development Board. So we, as the Planning Commission and Planning Commission staff, could not consider that private restriction that could be amended privately without any input from the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vallejos?
Thank you, Mayor. So are you telling me that the disagreement, was it presented to you at the hearing itself, or when did you first hear about this agreement? Because somewhere along the line, you mentioned about this, or Commissioner mentioned about the agreement. Somewhere along the line, they had to place something in your staff's head that, okay, there's an agreement already in existence. And so are you saying just had no play at all?
I'm saying that over 3 months ago, when this case was being developed and presented first to the Planning Commission, it was made known by the Industrial Development Board that there was a private agreement that relative to these properties. I've instructed my planning commissioners that because it's a private development agreement, that is not to be considered by the Planning Commission. So their recommendation is based on strictly looking at the land uses and appropriateness of the rezoning request.
So would you put a Burger King right there at C5?
At where?
C5, at the C5 that they have right now that they're applying for, an R4, would you allow a Burger King right there?
On Rollo Lane?
Yeah.
If that's what the developer wished to do, we could not deny a site plan to put that use there.
Okay, and then we're allowing a Burger King more down on the industrial lane down, right? There's a Burger King going up in there, right?
I can't confirm that. All I know is the property was rezoned on the northeast corner of Hancock Way and International Boulevard for supportive uses for the industrial park, and it could include everything from daycare centers to restaurants to other
Daycare centers and, okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions of Dr. Ripple regarding CZ 12, 2017? Dr. Ripple, I think I'll let you go ahead and present. Mr. Harper, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, a quick buzz in there. The consideration about the school system, Dr. Ripple?
Yes.
How strong of a consideration was that?
It was presented to the Planning Commission. At least one planning commissioner reiterated that particular concern in deliberation before the Planning Commission voted. The bottom line from, I just better quit there.
Yeah,
well, Dr. Ripple, I have a great amount of concern about our school system. We're up in attendance 1,400 or so, I think, this year as opposed to last year. And we're looking at a district out in Rossview that in my mind, I believe is the second most crowded district in the county system. And if we were to allow R4, that means we would be increasing the number of people in that district quite easily. Don't you think that would be a major concern?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Dr. Ripple on CZ 12, 2017? Dr. Ripple, because these cases are side by side, I think I'll let you go ahead and present CZ 13, 2017, and then we'll do a public hearing on both of them.
As long as the public hearings remain separate for the two cases.
They will.
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. Next case is the application of Cumberland Land Development Company, and they're requesting likewise rezoning from C5 to R4. This is just under 10 acres. Again, it's located on the east side of Rollo Lane, north of Rossview Road. My comments that I previously made are still accurate. The only thing that is different is that this property was also subject to the rezoning in 2012, and the eastern portion of the property was rezoned from C5 to R4, and a 500-foot C5 buffer strip was left on Rollo Lane. At the Planning Commission public hearing, Stanley Ross again spoke in favor of the development. Mike Evans spoke in opposition, And Dennis Furkowski also spoke in favor of the case. And again, Planning Commission staff opposed the rezoning for the same reason I gave previously, and the Planning Commission approved the rezoning in a split vote. Are there any questions?
Could you show the map highlighting the properties on this case on CZ 13, 2017?
Yeah, it shows up right. I can show the difference between the two. That's the later one. Okay, sorry.
That's CZ 13, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I get confused between the two.
That's okay. It's okay. Any questions of Dr. Ripple regarding CZ 13, 2017? All right, thank you, Dr. Ripple.
Thank you, Mayor.
At this time, we'll open a public hearing to hear comments regarding CZ 12, 2017. I just would remind all the speakers that try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Once the 3 minutes has expired, you'll hear a tone, a beep, some kind of noise, and we'd ask that you wrap your comments up. I know this will be probably a hotly debated topic, so we'll allow for a rebuttal from each side. So at this time, is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of CZ 12, 2017? If you would, please come forward and give us your name. If you're representing somebody, please let us know who you're representing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Stanley Ross. I'm representing KMG Properties. I'll also be representing Cumberland Land Development on the next case.
Okay.
So if you could allow my comments to speak for both cases, I'll be adopting these comments on the next one as well. We are asking to change from C5 to R4 on Rollo Lane. Like Dr. Ripple said, this is a C5 heavy arterial highway district. It's made for heavy motorist use, businesses that serve motorists, that kind of thing. You've got a 2-lane road with a weight restriction out there. So that's going to make it hard to get a lot of C5 properties out there when you've got weight restrictions from getting things in and out of there to these C5 properties. We feel like R4 is the better alternative for everybody in the area on this. And we would ask you to vote for that. I do want to address a couple of the issues that have come up. The first being the IDB wants to maintain a buffer out there. I feel like this buffer is kind of growing in place as we speak through the IDB's own actions, and I'd like to show you a little bit about why real quick. And I'm sorry I'm leaving the microphone, but right here across the street from us is the narrowest portion of the IDB property. You have detention basins outlined in blue here. You have power lines over here, so it severely limits your use for heavy industrial type activities. To the south, you've already got C5 property that the IDB has rezoned. You've got the Ajero Call Center, the fire and EMS stations, and then up to the north, you've got a furniture warehouse and sales facility. And I think that kind of gives you the inclination as to what's going to be going in this area as opposed to something like Hancock or LG. It's not going to be a heavy industrial type site that's going to be belching smoke or making noise in the night. It's going to be things like furniture warehouses and call centers. And that's where your buffer is actually coming in now. We've already got, as was pointed out, there's residential R1 at the north end of Rollo Lane and along Dunlop Lane, and that's actually the largest open space in the IDB's property in this area. So that buffer is growing in down here, and your larger industries going up to where there's already residential type things. Regarding that restriction that was brought up, that is something that my clients did agree to with the IDB 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 now. This came into effect because basically they were trying to develop the Cumberland Land Development guys were actually trying to develop a C5 use out there. Got a lot of pushback. It was actually kicked, the site plan was kicked to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Restrictions were put on it. I don't know that that was appropriate. But then the growth plan was amended. R4 was allowed in the area. The IDB had a representative on that growth plan committee. And when it came time to rezone, basically they got the message, you're not going to get a rezoning for any property out here unless you make a deal with the IDB. They were kind of, had their arms tied behind their back, had to go with this deal. It's been 5-6 years. It's apparent that C5 is not working out there, so they are requesting this rezoning. That restriction is, as Dr. Ripple pointed out, a private agreement between private parties. We'll deal with the IDB on that. We'd like to work with them in any way we can, but any options on the table for that, and we'll pursue those if the rezoning is granted. So we think that that's not something that the commission needs to worry about. That's something we'd like to work with the IDB on. In terms of, just winding up really quick, in terms of schools, this is schools are always going to be an issue when a rezoning comes up. It's always something that's going to be brought up. And as long as the IDB's out there doing their job and bringing businesses in here, we're going to have more people coming in to work. They're going to need housing. They're going to need schools. We have to look at that on a macro level. We can't microscopically look at just 10 acres of property and say this is going to destroy the schools. I think it's unfair to the landowners out there. We have to plan for the long term on that, and just piecemeal rezoning denials isn't going to do that. So with all that being said, I would encourage you to vote for this rezoning proposal next week. I think it's in the best interest of the community, and I think it's in the best interest of everybody in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Commissioner Nichols, do you have a question of Mr. Ross?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ross, you said it should not be a concern of this commission of whether the restrictions are in place. Sir, I firmly disagree. To refresh your memory, this body fully funds the IDB. So if there's an adjudication in court, who do you think pays for it? This body. So it is a direct reflection on this body, and that restriction we need to take into consideration, sir.
I think regardless of whether you approve or disapprove the rezoning, any remedies they may have would still, regarding that restriction, would still be available to them. So the rezoning is not going to necessarily say this is not going to be an issue for us. It may be something that comes up. We may be able to work with the IDB. We may not. But I do think that agreement, when they were basically had their hands tied behind their back and told you've got to make an agreement with the IDB to use any of the rest of this property, I don't think it was fair at the time. I don't think it was fair now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sokol, you have a question for Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. Why develop it at all?
Excuse me, sir?
Why are you developing it at all?
Well, my clients have an investment-backed interest in that property they'd like to see going forward. It's not really usable as farmland, so that they would like to move forward with something that it can be used for. It's not really big enough to get a lot out of it as a farming operation or anything like that.
So the way it's been described to me was that you folks signed on to an agreement with the IDB. Now you've changed your mind and you want to develop it against the agreement.
They tried to work with the IDB when this came up, and were basically told you have to do something with the IDB to get any other kind of rezoning going forward. And
but you did sign the agreement.
That they did, and I think it was not fair to them to put them in that position, but they did because they had to, and I think that's kind of the impetus for all this at this point.
So you folks changed your mind.
It's become obvious over the past 6 years that this is not tenable as a C5 property.
So sell it off or do something else with it?
Well, I mean, we can sit here and talk about various ways you could go all night, but I mean, it's not as if they haven't explored their options with it at C5.
Thank you.
Commissioner Harper?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ross, it seems there's a vein of conversation here that indicates to me, maybe I'm reading between the lines, maybe I'm not, some hesitancy on whether the property owner will uphold their agreement that they signed. And I'm more than a tad bit concerned about that. If I signed an agreement, I intend to uphold it. So are you saying there's a good possibility that they won't uphold that agreement that they signed?
I don't know what's in the future at this point for that agreement. I think that the agreement was to avoid residential use in that area, and it's become obvious that not using that property, or that using that property as a C5 piece of property is just untenable at this point.
I don't think you really answered my question, but my question was pretty straightforward, I thought. Do I need to rephrase it, or?
My clients would like to use this property for R4 development. The agreement was to avoid residential development. So yes, they would like to get out of that agreement.
Thank you.
Commissioner Redd?
Thank you, Mayor. And for me, with all due respects to some of my colleagues, I will be voting on a zoning case, not a legal case as far as that goes. And even Dr. Ripple, I think, said in his statement that the staff did not take any of the legal part into consideration when thinking of the zoning case. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Ross? All right. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of CZ 12 2017?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Rex Hawkins. I'm the owner of one of the pieces of properties. Since 6 years ago, a lot of things have changed in that area. When we got the original rezoned, it was no hand-cooked tires out there, or the 911 center, and a lot of that stuff wasn't there. Since then, over 40% of the renters I know on the top side are employees of Hancock Tire. So we're actually helping them. They bring their means of transportation to and from work straight there and drop them off and then take them back to work. As a developer in any new subdivisions, if we had to have allocated acres, as you all well know, designated for green space. We can't go to the property owners beside us and say, you can't use this land because it's our green space. Well, that's how we feel the industrial board is doing to us. We've had this property for sale for over 10 years now, have not had anybody interested. It's C5, which I believe if we were here trying for C5 on a weight restricted road, it would be crazy. And we're trying to release the C5 and go to the R4. And one point I did want to make out that this commission funds the industrial board, the county taxes. The piece of properties that were rezoned 6 years ago, right now are bringing in over $250,000 for the for the county, which funds industrial boards. At the end of this year, it'll be over $350,000, and the property that we're trying to get zoned could be another $200,000 that would help support the industrial board also in future properties. But we have had it for sale for 10 years, over 10 years, and hadn't had anybody interested. Going forward with R4, we have a lot of people that live in Montgomery County that pay taxes, and they're in a lot of y'all's districts, that keeps their jobs and creates jobs for them and be able to take care of their families. So it goes a long way. Construction, this is just a small part of how it helps grow the county in itself.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Hawkins? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of CZ 12 2017? Anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to CZ 12 2017?
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Mike Evans, Executive Director of the Industrial Development Board. I'm here as a representative of the Industrial Board. We met a month ago. The board voted that as Executive Director, I would speak against this zoning case. I'm here on behalf of the Industrial Development Board. Our primary reason for being here is to protect the $28.6 million investment that was made half of it funded by this county government, $14.3 million by the county, and the other $14.3 was by the city. So we invested in this property. We spent tax dollars of 195,000 people now to make this investment. Because of that, in this period of time from 2000 up to now, we've generated over $4.7 billion worth of new industrial investment and over 7,000 jobs. So we now have about 320 developable acres in this South Industrial Park area that we're talking about, and we're trying to protect that so that we can utilize that in creating additional jobs. I have shared with you all 7 documents. You've had it electronically. It's in front of you in print now, so I won't belay a lot on those. But I do, I guess in summary, just kind of want to go through. We purchased these farms, the Ross, the Bainham, the Marshall, and the Hayes, to develop the South Industrial Park. And yes, there were 12 houses up on the northeast corner of Rollo Lane when we acquired those, and we listened to those landowners, and we had 1 or 2 of them ask questions when the zoning of M2 came up, and we answered those questions. So we successfully obtained our M2, and those houses were there. We had a client working with us that was interested in putting a project out there, and they told us they had concerns about those houses and that they, if they chose our site as selection, that they would want to work with the industrial board to acquire those homes over time as they became available for sale from those landowners. So that was the first time we were told up front by a client that industrial and residential are not good, comfortable neighbors, okay? Let's go back to that CZ 14-2005 zoning case when Mr. Mace was purchasing the Pressler Farm. The Pressler Farm is the large farm that was east of Rollo Lane that these parcels came out of. And we worked with Mr. Mace. He reached out to the Industrial Development Board and talked to us when he was buying this large tract of land and was willing to put in some transitional zoning of C5 to give us the transition from heavy industrial to commercial to residential. So we did that and worked with him at that time, and both of these companies have bought partials of that property from the Mace developer that bought that. So it has evolved over time. I will tell you that according to our records that Bill Mace sold Cumberland Land, their property, July the 3rd of 2007 and sold it to KMG Properties, which was formerly Pool House, in October of 2000, in July of 2007. So they purchased this after that zoning was in place. They bought it with that zoning on there. And yes, they did enter into an agreement, and I do not remember tying anybody's hands. We agreed to meet with them and negotiate in 2011 to this recorded deed and negative land use agreements with both parties, and they agreed to those. And in that agreement, if you look at page 2, paragraph numeral 1, they tell you that they will not put any R4 housing in that 500-foot buffer area that's remaining, and they will not seek rezoning of that 500-foot. So we've developed the industrial park. We've put all of the infrastructure into this part of the county, and they have acquired land to the east of it after we put in this infrastructure, and they're building off of that infrastructure. So they're getting the opportunity of buying this land at a value and developing infrastructure that would have been a much more costly investment for them if we had not already put this infrastructure in place. So this, I think, we've worked together over time. We have agreements, and I'm just simply asking them to honor this agreement. And your analogy is right. If it does end into a legal discussion and battle over these easements, I, as an Industrial Development Board Executive Director, will come back to you all and ask for funding to do that. So, yes, we can end it by not approving this R4 zoning. Thank you. Be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner Hodges.
Yeah, just a few questions. So the first one's the same question I asked Dr. Ripple. You know, if Company X is looking at this property, but they don't want a residential within a certain area, why are they going to come here at all if there's already so many residential?
There's a good chance they won't.
So essentially, you know, the companies we're going to be looking at are going to be okay with residential generally, right?
I think we will have to find that end user that is not concerned about the residentials that are as close as they are now. But two wrongs don't make a right. We shouldn't continue to build that residential out to our boundary.
I get that, but I guess what I'm saying is if we're already going to have to find company X that's fine with residential, what difference does it make if we allow one more?
It'd be that much more difficult.
Okay. And so how many acres is our M2, the IDB's property?
We have about 325 developable acres remaining in this South Park. Right across the street from these two parcels, we have about a 23-acre developable area. So it does fit primarily for your light industrial assembly or warehousing type industrial users. That's what I think is the best target for us to try to put into that area, and the heavier industrial will go up in that northern portion.
And how many acres of that total 325 would be eliminated if we rezone this? How much of a buffer zone would you have to create? How many acres?
I can't answer that, Mr. Hodges. I don't know that answer.
And then just finally, I mean, have you offered to, so I completely agree that at times government, and I've told you this before, at times government has to say no to rezoning. But in my eyes, when we dictate that something is important enough for us not to rezone, then we should be willing to buy it. If it's that important to us, then we should know it's important enough to pay for. Are we willing to do that?
At this time, my board hasn't talked about that. I have made an inquiry. The list price of that property in total is about $1.4 million plus for roughly 14 acres of land. It would be difficult to remarket that for an industrial user at that value. It's not adjacent to our existing industrial park. I mean, there's some challenges there. Is that an option? It is an option. I'm not sure it's an option right now that I could support. Investing $1.4 million into that land, it's small, and it is going to be limited use, but they made it small. Now they're saying they can't find users for it. I can't fix everybody's problems. I wished I could. I would like to say the Industrial Development Board is pro-business. That's what we're here for. I would like to make one correction that was brought up about the Red Knight Distribution Company. That is not a retail sales facility. That is a warehouse distribution that distributes the furniture that the retailer sells furniture from his retail stores. So the retail customer has the option to come directly to the warehouse and pick up their furniture. And yes, if that retail customer walks in there and sees something else he wants to buy, occasionally, yes, something is sold there, but he is not retail selling furniture at that warehouse. It is a warehouse facility, okay? And the EMS and the 911 they referred to, that was always planned that we wanted to have those service facilities in our industrial park to keep the working area safe for the employees that were generating jobs. So yes, we're going to have those facilities, and we have them, and we're blessed to have them in there.
Commissioner Vallejos.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Commissioner Hodges may have asked these questions about what can go there, but I'm already thinking of the residential homes that are up at the northern portion up there, and I think industry, if they were to come, would say the same thing, hey, there's no buffer zone, these homes are already there. I think you said that, Commissioner Hodges asked you, would you consider purchasing? You said, well, yeah, but what could I use it for? It'd be difficult and challenging. Well, that's the same thing they're facing. Let me finish. It's difficult and it's challenging on them also. And we as government, we're restricting them and we're making it more difficulty on them. And sometimes it comes a time when government needs to say, okay, hold on. How are we going to hurt this development from coming into place when there's already an existing development out there? And yes, we do make contracts, but we make contracts all the time, and so there comes a time when we can make changes to help our community. We give tax dollars, incentives to all these companies coming here. When are we going to start looking at our own and start helping our own here locally? And that's what I'm for. I have been a supporter of you, and I will support you. You've done an outstanding job, and I appreciate it, but sometimes we got to look at our local developers, and I haven't always voted for the local developer. But I think we have restricted them, and yes, they made an agreement, but what do you do when the two words you just said, difficult and challenging, is facing them is perplexed? And so I'm asking you.
We made their life less difficulty and less challenging in 2011 when we gave them 700 foot of depth that they did not have and allowed them, with the agreement that they signed, the ability to develop over 12 to 15 acres of R4 apartment complexes. So that's how we helped them, and that's how we worked with them. And they agreed to this limited 500 foot of transitional zoning. I asked, let's just simply make them live up to their agreement.
Well, I'm going to be supporting this also based on what Commissioner Wallace also said, based solely on the rezoning. I believe it'll help us with jobs and housing, and we still got over 500 jobs yet to be filled at Hancock. It'd be a great place to house some of these folks coming in.
That private agreement that the Regional Planning Commission could not look at, I understand. That's in that category. But this private agreement is also a public agreement. The Industrial Development Board is one of those parties, and I am your public body working for you guys.
But I also represent constituents out there, and I speak on behalf of constituents. So, you know, not just you. You work for the government. I am an elected official to serve in the government, but I also represent the people.
I'm just stating the facts.
Well, I'm stating the facts back to you.
Commissioner Nichols.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that's been discussed is the development of the area, and what's not been spoken, but it's in our literature to read, is commissioners, we have more than 2,800 plots that's already been approved by you in the Rossview area. They're already ready, set for the property owner and the builder and the developer to build, and that's a challenge for all of us, for the school system. With that many additional possible residents, it's already approved, I'm hesitant to consider more, because we have a problem right now this year, as you all read the paper, with 1,300 plus students this one year. So we have the big elephant in the room is not only funding government, but funding the school system and being able to educate our children. And the Rossview right now has portables almost to their limit. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention because no one had discussed the additional approved housing in that district. Thank you.
Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Evans, quick question. It seems like we're neglecting one issue here. I think it's pretty important. It's Rollo Lane. This road is, as has been stated, not suitable for a C5. I've been on the road. I can understand why there'd be some talk of that. What would it cost to make Rollo Lane more compatible with the C5, so it could be, you know, for a person that owned that property, it could be then developed for a C5? Do you have any idea?
I really don't have an idea, no, sir. I mean, we as the industrial board own the property on the west side of it, and we would be compatible with helping with the easements of that. So, you know, if it makes sense, that's something that we could look at. But that Rollo Road is a county road. You must understand at the south end of it, it does connect into the state route 237, which is Rossview Road. So we would have to work with the state of Tennessee to improve that intersection because of it being a state highway. And I'll tell you that when we were looking at making the improvements on Rossview Road, when we were negotiating the Hancock agreement, a plea was made by an individual to extend it down to that intersection and improve all of that, and it could not be considered at that time by the state. And I understand why. Their industrial access road funds are there to enhance that industrial project, not the major road. So they are aware that intersection is rough and dangerous, and they don't have the funds to fix it at this time. It's what I understand. Now, I'm not speaking for them, but that's what I understand.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Riccone.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm probably in somewhat of a unique situation in that I was involved and spoke to this county commission for the zoning when it came up, and I want to go ahead and make that clear. That was Mike Evans spoke against it, and kind of have a somewhat knowledge, or a little more knowledge than probably most, of the agreement that was entered into. But yeah, I'm trying not to impose that on my questioning to you. But a couple things really just jump out at me. You keep referencing this 1,200-foot restriction, this buffer, and you know there was never a recorded buffer on this. Isn't that correct?
All I know is that when Mr. Mace was purchasing the Pressler farm, that him buying that property, he agreed to the 1,200 foot of C5 zoning on that property. What was recorded or not recorded at regional planning, I'm not aware of. That was, I mean, I don't have anything to do with regional planning other than being a voice when need be. So I don't know that answer.
And so when the property owners, with the buffer not being recorded, and when the property owners tried to get this rezoned, I mean, it will suffice to say that the IDB fought it as vigorously as you're fighting this today.
Yes.
And at some point, the only way that the developers could use the land or have any use of the land that they had invested in was to come up with an arrangement with the IDB. And that's how this came about. We all know that.
Well, it came about because one of the developers was going to put a use in C5, which was allowed at that time, that was not received well by all of the residentials that was built to the west of that property. And so they put pressure on you, the commissioners, and the government. And there was some request made to the Industrial Development Board to sit down with these two developers and see if we could come to an agreement. And if that's tying hands, I would disagree with that, okay?
Well, I don't think I asked, I didn't make my statement probably as well as I should have. But where I'm going with this is the most pressing thing I've heard is when Commissioner Hodges asked you, would you just buy it and the weight use? And basically, this land has been for sale for C5 for over 10 years and it hasn't sold. We have a weight use limit on Rollo Lane, and so the land isn't valuable or worth anything as C5 because it can't be sold. It's on the tax base as raw land, and we generate taxes by having improvements built on the land. When you just stated you really didn't even want it because it has such limited use.
I did not say that, Commissioner. I said it would be difficult.
It would be difficult. And so what I'm facing now is we have a zoning that takes all the legitimate use from the land to the landowner. I'd almost say it's a taking. And then you rezoned 3 or 4 months ago, didn't you rezone some of your M2 to C5?
That is correct.
Have you sold that yet?
I have a contract on a parcel.
Is there any kind of incentives on the contract? I don't need specifics.
No, sir, there is not.
Did you sell it cheaper than what the land is that these parties are selling their C5 for?
The Industrial Development Board entered into a contract that matched the land that was sold on the south side of Rossview Road to a like user. So we did not discount against what the going market is on Rossview Road, which is where the property is we have a contract on. So the answer is no.
But the IDB now is actively selling the same thing that these private parties are selling.
I gave you a copy of our development agreement that was created in 2013, and it indicated development area B and development area B being for the purpose of office and retail. So it's been documented since 2003 that the intended use of that southeast corner was for the purpose of C5 type development in today's zoning laws. They've changed since 2000. We were given an opinion back in 2000 that was whatever was allowed in C5 would roll into M2. With the amendments of our, I don't know what they are, but our regional planning guidelines of zoning, that rollover doesn't carry forward anymore. Now, I understand that opinion would be challenged in today's time, but we, the industrial board, were going on what was told us as a board back in the 1999-2000 period, that C5 type would fit in M2. That's changed, and it definitely doesn't work today, and we recognize that, and that's why we came to regional planning and asked for the rezoning to the C5.
And the last M2 that the IDB has, that's across Rollo Lane from the two subject properties. And I applaud y'all for bringing in Hancock, but that's a large site. And I believe you said earlier that that's not the kind of manufacturing site that would fit on the sliver between International and Rollo.
No, I told you I have about 23 developable acres there, and Hankook is a 469-acre site. So no, Hankook would not fit on that 23 acres, no. But that doesn't mean a warehouse or some type of supply service company or a small assembly company would not fit on that. And that's what we're having to target that to.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jason Hodges.
Just real quick, how much did you sell the property for? I mean, for the Burger King acquisition, I mean, how much?
It's a contract that has been signed, but is not, earnest money is not in, so I'd really just like not to go public on that until it is a hard contract, Mr. Hodges. I'll be glad to share that with you, but right now, until the ink and the money is in the bank, I don't want to risk it.
So is the deal, though, less than what Rex or either the developers are selling their property for right now?
It is more on a per acre basis.
All right, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Commissioner Vallejos.
Thank you, Mayor. I think at the end of the day, it's about the bottom, it's about the dollar. And I would hope that we would, if we were to put anything in that sliver of property we have there, it would be something that would also safeguard the community that's already existing. I don't think you would put anything there that would endanger that community out there. So I think we're safe to say that if we were to zone this, back to R4, I think they would be safe, because I just don't see you put anything large like you stated. But at the same time, even if we didn't pass this and they couldn't sell it, you would put none there that would endanger the community that's already existing there. So I think it's safe to say that if we rezoned this, we would be good.
I think
it's about the bottom dollar at the end of the day, and we got to take care of our own community.
I appreciate your comments. I would say we would not intentionally put anything in the business park that would endanger our public, okay? So we'll make sure that they comply with all the federal guidelines. We're in the toughest country of rules, laws, and regulations on manufacturing. So as long as they comply with that, we have to consider it's safe and doable. Here's what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect those individual landowners over there that will fill up over time, and this company, this one company that comes over there, and they may be a 24/7 operation. They may have traffic going in and out. They may have lights in their parking lot. They may have an outside speaker that tells their workforce it's lunchtime, it's time, whatever. Those 50 to 70 to 80 houses then have a complaint to you, the commissioners, that this business across the street from my residential home makes too much noise, has too much light, creates way too much traffic. We're trying to protect those types of complaints coming to you. And that's why this transitional zoning was put into place, was so this could be done in place.
Any other questions of Mr. Evans? Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is there anyone? Commissioner Sokol, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, of Dr. Ripple.
Oh, okay. Mike, he has a question for Dr. Ripple.
Yes, Commissioner. If this land is approved for redevelopment, how many units would go on it? Ballpark.
Usually in the range of 10 to 12 per acre, and I would have to get the numbers back out. So I've got them in the report in terms of the number of dwellings should be generated. Let me grab the report and I'll give the number. Based historically, the R4 district, the KMG property would generate 97 dwelling units. And the Cumberland land property would generate 117 units. That's historically, so we've got just slightly over 200 units for these two tracts of land.
So getting back to the original argument and the reason for the disapproval, and in concern with Commissioner Nichols, that's 200 new students, at least. And with the school system already overburdened in that particular area, and according to the papers, we have a larger than normal increase in the school. So if we develop this, the tax base is never going to have to pay for the new school we would have to build out there.
Tax base is the entire Montgomery County. And if you go back and look at the arguments over time, you'll find that residential development generally does pay its own way, but you're going to have short periods of time where you don't have the resources to expand the school system. I can tell you that the staff voted disapproval, Planning Commission recommended approval on both these cases.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, my vote is going to be no for this because I think that we have
Thank you, Dr. Ripple.
the school system in that particular area. And once that's affected, then we have just gone through an argument with the school system and the parents about having to take their children to a new school to try to ease the burden on this. So it's like a domino effect. If we don't build a new school, we've got to move the students. That means we have more congestion on the road, more buses, more issues with having to take students from one area to another. And we just got done having an argument over that issue.
Commissioner Ray, do you have a question for somebody?
No, sir. Just want to
Just
respond to
just
what
a
was
statement.
said. That's all.
Well, commissioners, I want everybody to be able to say what they want to say, but right now we're in public hearing, and if it's okay with y'all.
Okay, I'll bring up Dr. Ripple and just
okay, that's fine.
I just was, Dr. Ripple, isn't it a very good possibility, even if we turn down the zoning request, that people, because the jobs would be in that area and because of the school district or what, people could just move into an already existing house or apartment? I'm just saying, not necessarily a rezoning is going to make more people go to a place.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to CZ 12 2017? Anyone else in the audience to speak in opposition? All right. Mr. Ross, would you like a 3-minute rebuttal? Yes. And Mr. Evans, I'll afford you that same opportunity so since y'all are both speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Just a couple of things. First of all, in concerns to the population out there, I do agree that this rezoning is not bringing more people in. People are already coming to the area. They're coming to live near where they work. And that's to commend the IDB, because they are creating jobs out there and people want to work at them. We're not doing something that's going to be a 200 unit single family subdivision. This is R4. It's going to be rental property. A lot of these people are going to be workers. I don't think you're going to have one child per every dwelling unit out there. So it's not something that's necessarily going to make or break any single school, like I pointed out before, like I mentioned before. But in terms of, I did want to bring up something regarding the buffer, the 1,200-foot buffer that was mentioned. That was not a restriction or a resolution of the county commission on zoning or anything like that. My understanding is Mr. Mace said, I want to rezone some property. Hey, IDB, will you just leave me alone if I put 1,200 C5 in there, 1,200 feet of C5 in there? And they said, okay, and he went and applied for 1,200 feet of C5 and then rezoned the Pressler Farm to residential R1 subdivision. There's nothing that could have been found in any kind of title search or anything like that that would say there's a 1,200-foot buffer that can never be rezoned here. What that was a standard rezoning decision that can be that could have been reapplied for, and the zoning changed at any point after that. So I want to say this buffer was not really a new buffer or a set buffer that was required by law or anything like that. My clients go to rezone and they're told there's a 1,200-foot buffer, but in actuality, all it was a statement that I'm gonna rezone this and create a 1,200-foot buffer, and nothing prevented any future owner from changing that through the zoning process. So that's one thing I want to mention about that 1,200-foot buffer. And with that, I would like to ask you to approve the rezoning request. If you have any further questions of me, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Ross? Thank you, sir. Mr. Evans, do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay. All right. We are now closing the public hearing on CZ 12-2017. At this time, we will have a public hearing on CZ 13-2017. Application of Cumberland Land Development, LLC, from C5 to R4. Is anyone in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of this application? I know, Mr. Ross, you indicated that your comments would cover for both, but I know we have a separate owner as well.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening. My name is Dennis Zilkowski, and I'm one of the owners of the property that we're requesting rezoning on. The thing that I find interesting about this is it's very easy to create it into a good guy, bad guy thing. And we don't think the Industrial Development Board are bad guys, but currently we're being portrayed as somebody that we don't care about the schools, we don't care about the health of the Industrial Development Board or the industrial park. And quite honestly, there's nothing further than the truth. We do care. If you go back and look at the donations made to Aspire, which helped fund various projects with the Industrial Development Board, we're contributors to that. I have a son that's a teacher. My kids went to the Clarksville-Montgomery County school system. I'm a graduate of the Clarksville-Montgomery County school system. I'm sure many of you people have seen me over at Clarksville High School, and I went to Northwest, so it was extremely hard for me to do that. I support all the sports over there financially. I supported wrestling specifically for 13 years over there as an assistant coach, as a president of the Wrestling Booster Club and stuff. Helped build the addition to the wrestling building over there with funds that Jimmy and I developed from profits that we've made on various and assorted subdivisions that we've done all over Montgomery County. And when we developed a subdivision, Mr. Sokol, we realize we're having an effect on a school. And on at least 5 occasions, we have donated money, at least $5,000, and even more to Northeast, to Rossview, and to Clarksville High. And Jimmy could probably correct me, there's probably one that I've missed. But we've done that at least 5 times. So we do care about the school systems. one of the things that you need to know is if you rezone this, it's not going to be poof. There's going to be something less than 200 units out there, because the number is actually less than 200 units. I don't know exactly how many Rex is going to have, but we're going to have around 80 units if we got the zoning approved. And as far as things changing, when we didn't have this 1,200-foot buffer, or legal buffer that we were told we had, but it did not show up when we did any searches to buy the property, it was no legal restriction. We were told we need to work with the Industrial Development Board. So in 2011, we agreed to do the 500-foot buffer. Never in our mind did we think we wouldn't be able to sell that as C5. But the uses of C5 don't really work. Gas stations, motels, and that kind of thing out there. And quite honestly, they would be a bigger detriment to the surrounding area than the multifamily that we would like to do. Our current request should generate, and it won't happen overnight, somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 more property taxes in that area. So what's already there took a while to get there. What we want to do will take a while to get there. We're assuming, like we do all the time, and you all generally do it, we're assuming you're going to do the right job and you're going to get the schools built. We've got a recent wheel tax increase that's not going to cover enough, but it's going to help cover some of it. But it's going to help pay for new schools. There's new schools slated for that area. There's, I believe, a request to rezone kids. It happens all the time. You know, this kid goes here this year, and in 3 or 4 years, because of development, somebody's going to go somewhere else. But it's not the end of the world. It's what, as Montgomery Countyans, families have faced over the years. And it's never popular, but it works. And people get to meet other kids that they never would have seen if they hadn't gone to another school. So to me, being an Army brat and growing up and moving a lot, that's not a detrimental thing. That just helps make our kids grow more. If you look in the stands, you see a lot of green hats. I didn't want to wear one. It'd mess up my hair. But these are people that work in the industry. And we're not Google, and we're not Hankook, and we're not LG, but we're an industry. And we're an industry in this town and in this county that provides a lot of jobs and a lot of money and a lot of tax base, and increases and takes a piece of farmland that's probably paying practically nothing in taxes, and creates funds and provide roads and sewer and water systems that carries everything that we do. We're not asking for handouts, but after 5 years with nobody knocking on our door wanting to buy this property, and then we look, and it's fine with us if Mike and those guys want to build a Burger King over there, but we can't compete with them. We can't. They had a mission change somewhere in life. They were created to create big industrial buildings out there. And now they're creating Burger Kings out there, and that's fine. More power to them. We need those. But we can't continue to have our hands tied behind our back and sit there and pay very little property taxes and a whole lot of interest to the banks. We'd like to go on and finish this project out. We'd like for Mike and the Industrial Board to realize we're supporters of theirs, and they need to help us get through this situation. And we'll work with them. We have worked with them. We took a 5-year penalty by agreeing to have this buffer on our properties.
Try to wrap your comments up, please.
I'd like for you to consider allowing us to have our R4. It's not going to be as painful as some of you think, and it's going to be more painful than some of you that are poo-pooing the school's concerns. But in the long run, it's going to be okay, and the Industrial Development Board is going to be okay. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience to speak on behalf of CZ 13, 2017?
Stanley Ross, represent Cumberland Land Development. Just like to kind of reiterate the points that I made earlier on the previous case, and just point out that this is not, it's obviously not feasible as C5. It's been sitting there for a long time. There's not much that can be done with it. there aren't a lot of options out there for C5. Like Mr. Evans said, it's difficult for a C5 piece of property over there. There is an appropriate buffer that's going in place over there. The IDB has basically created their own buffer. I think Mr. Zilkowski hit the points about the schools admirably, and what he said was right on. So I would just ask you to approve this request, much as the previous request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Anyone else in the audience to speak on behalf of CZ 13, 2017?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Jimmy Settle. I'm partner of Cumberland Land Development. I'd like to quickly talk about the white elephant, the agreement. I signed it, Dennis signed it, Rex signed it. We've never denied that. But in 25 years of standing in front of this commission with zoning cases for sellers, buyers, myself, my job, y'all's job, disclosure is very, very important. This red area you see down here, that's part of the area that the IDB can recently y'all allowed to be rezoned to C5. When that rezone is when, y'all want to know why we started this? When they started C5, we said, like, I guess they don't need a buffer. They're doing C5 themselves. Okay. We applied for rezoning. At that point when we found out that IDB's restrictions, way before we entered this agreement, allowed them to go into C5. I didn't know it. Most of y'all probably didn't know it. So when that changed, we're like, hey, we have an agreement. We know that. We realize that. But if they can do C5, then maybe they don't need a buffer. They're buffering everywhere else. That's what got it started. The Burger King. I can tell you for a fact, and it's in the paper today about it, but I can tell you for a fact the Burger King is under contract for less than the property across the road that the private developer owns. It was priced cheaper to begin with than that was priced at. The sellers have told me that for a fact. Another thing to resolve it all, this little sliver of M2, 23 acres, if the IDB would like another buffer of C5, they have it on their website for 20,000 acre. We've all three agree, rezone it to C5, we'll buy it. That gives you a buffer. You get money back on the tax rolls, then you got a buffer between R4. Schools, it's been talked about. Mr. Nichols said, you know, you quoted to us, if there was a rezoning, redistribution of students, we wouldn't have a problem. Question brung up about these homes and all built. One thing to point out, these apartments right here have been built in the last 3 years. They're less than 500 feet from the IDB. These 22 homes have been built in the last 3 years. They're less than 500 feet. So it's not like this has just suddenly happened. There are residential apartments and houses being built less than 500 feet from that property today, have been for the last 3 years. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Settle? Thank you, sir.
For your time.
Okay, we've had the opportunity for 3 people to speak in favor of CZ 13. Is there anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to CZ 13, 2017?
Mayor, Commissioner, again, Mike Evans with the Industrial Development Board. Some of the encroachment closer than the 500 has happened over time. That's what happens when zoning takes place. We didn't have a restrictive deed against those property owners. We had no real basis other than we don't really need that housing that close to our industrial users. So if we had had that agreement, yes, we would have spoke up. Was it C5 that was rezoned to R4? Yes, but we were unable to, we didn't have the basis that we have on these two landowners to not seek that. I would call in that deed restriction that I referred to you all later, and those are documents number 4 and 5 that I provided to you all, or 5 and 6, I'm sorry. There's another paragraph on page 3, and that paragraph is numeral 4. And what it goes into is that this is a 50-year agreement, and it is renewable by another 50 years automatically. It's a 100-year agreement. These restrictions shall terminate automatically upon the development of rezoning of any portion of the dominant tenant, which in this agreement is the IDB, for residential purposes. C5 is not residential. The Industrial Board has not rezoned any of its property to residential, and we have no intentions of rezoning any of our property to residentials. The only reason we seek C5 in this southeast corner, which we all along had targeted for potential retail and office, was because the zoning changed, and we were required to have C5 to be in compliance from that. When were they adopted? Do you remember 2013, 14? The new zoning. The new zoning was 2015. And that's when we realized we had to come in and ask for that C5 zoning on that southeast section. So that's why we did what we did. Thank you.
Commissioner Nichols, you have a question of Mr. Evans?
Yes, Mr. Evans, I want to tell you that there's some key information that Dennis and Jimmy provided this body that I wished I would have had all of that information at the Planning Commission. Commissioners, I've been strongly opposed to this, but after hearing some of the key things that Dennis and Jimmy said, I want you to know that I'm going to support the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Evans? Anyone else in the audience to speak in opposition to CZ 13, 2017? Anyone else in the audience to speak in opposition to CZ 13, 2017? All right, at this time, we're going to close the public hearing on CZ 13, 2017. We'll now move into our resolutions. Our first resolution is 1791, resolution to accept state grant funding for Montgomery County Animal Care and Control. Any questions on 1791? Yes, sir. There's no match on 1791. 1792 is a resolution to amend the budgets of various funds for fiscal year 2018 in certain areas of revenues and expenditures. Mr. Taylor, you have anything you want to add to that other than if there's some questions?
Most of this is just carry forward grants from prior fiscal year. The only item is on the first page showing the appropriations. It's if you remember, we had $18,000 the past couple of years budgeted for the network of care for veterans and the data processing services for the IT budget. That's being taken over by another entity. $12,000 of that is going to be reappropriated to purchase a spark board for the conference room in the mayor's office, plus across the hall in the third floor conference room. It's no new money, but the rest of it is just grant carry forward.
Any questions of Mr. Taylor on 1792? 1793, resolution to provide additional funding in the amount of $150,000 to Two Rivers Corporation, a foundation according to 501c4 of the Internal Revenue Code. Any questions on 1793? Commissioner Redd.
Yes, isn't this the TRC, isn't this a city entity?
It's a nonprofit
It's not a city entity.
So it wasn't set up by a state statute. It's a nonprofit currently?
I'll let Mr. Harvey
It's not
answer.
part of the old CBID?
You know, I want to be simplistic but not sound terse when I say this. There's a statute that authorizes a city, a municipality to create a development district.
Yes.
And when they create a development district, they can engage a not-for-profit to manage the district. So a standalone not-for-profit that ultimately became the TRC was their chosen manager for their downtown development district.
So but they're not set up then by a state statute, by a municipality?
The downtown development district is allowable by state statute to be created by a municipality, and the municipality can hire a not-for-profit
right.
to manage it. And so the not-for-profit is not a city department. And I'm not uncomfortable offering opinions, but it's well in the news and well discussed currently, but I don't think there's any dispute that the TRC is a part of the progeny of the original not-for-profit that was created and then became the manager of the downtown development district created by the city.
Right. But it was originally the CBID.
Correct.
That is now the TRC.
Correct.
That is a city entity that is set up by state statute.
No.
That was set up by a state statute.
The downtown development district was created by a statute that authorizes a municipality to create a downtown development district. The statute says the district, once created, can be managed by a not-for-profit.
Okay, it can be managed. But in any case, whenever they first started the CBID, the agreement was that they would have the properties assessed that was in the district, and they would participate monetarily wise, and that they would be self-funded by that state statute and that agreement.
Maybe.
And then later, I think it was just a vote of the city council that had changed that. But what I'm trying to say is these type of CBIDs, these type of state statutes, normally is the property owners participate with an assessment on their property and they contribute. It's not by the city or a county that puts money in there out of the general fund.
I think the problem I have with what you're doing in your discussion with me, Commissioner, is you're talking about what's typically done or usually done as opposed to what can be done.
I understand.
And so the statute that allows a municipality to create a downtown development district can give, through its management, the power of assessment to those properties within the district as a fundraising source. There's some debate about whether it has to be a totally self-generating source to comply with the statute. But I don't know of anything that would mean that private not-for-profit couldn't also solicit contributions from the public at large and obtain other sources in the form of grants and so forth. And so I can't tell you what they would typically do.
Okay, and whenever they are set up, they are supposed to report where their money goes to the municipality that set them up in the state statute.
No.
I've never seen, I guess this is my point. The TRC, I've never seen as a city councilman or a county commissioner where the money goes that the city has put in to the TRC, and how much have we put in over the last 3 years into the TRC that was in our budget?
If you're asking me that, you're asking the wrong person.
Jeff, probably he can tell me.
150,000 this year. I believe it was 150 last year, and I'd have to check the year before that.
I think it was 108 last year.
Was it 108, I believe?
I don't remember. I got I'm just reading what I got. I got an email from the chairman of the TRC today regarding some of the questions you're asking, and I'll be glad to forward this to all the commissioners as well. But it says that the ordinance that was authorized the formation of TRC, the ordinance did not comply with the shall include language required by TCA by virtue of something, but it basically goes on to say that the city council did create this without subjecting the district to the self-financing provisions of the Central Improvement District Act of 1990, which means that TRC is not required to be self-financing.
Very good. And I won't dispute that, but that's not my point. My point is basically this. We are the county government. County government cannot set up this type of organization by state statute. Only a municipality can.
I said that.
And this is, okay, very good. And I guess what and maybe whenever I said it's a city entity, this is basically what I'm saying. We are the county government that oversees the school system and this sort of thing, and we are now going to give them another $150,000, and I'm not sure, and I've made some phone calls and still trying to find out, but I'm not sure exactly, once we give them this tax dollars, in which these property owners do not participate in the assessment, the mayor just said it was set up that way, and probably, maybe it was, but they do not participate, but they are getting tax dollars from the county just for themselves. And I've got a business, I went to the grand opening, it's off of Dover Road, an appliance business where the guy's got a laundromat, and I was there at the grand opening. They get nothing. And some of these businesses here is getting a great deal of money and benefit whenever we, in my opinion, because we're the county government, and we just spoke about this, we have problems funding our schools. And to me, I think this is the city's operation, the TRC. They are the one that set this up, and they are the ones that should be supporting them and funding them, not the county. And I know some people are going to say, well, the city won't do it. And I say, well, take that up with the city council and the city mayor. They might not like the way we fund our school system, but they don't offer to do that for us. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, anybody else? Okay. Anyone else? Any comments on 1793? 1794, resolution to adopt the 2018 legislative agenda as presented by the Legislative Liaison Committee. Any questions on that? I'd certainly like to, at this time, publicly thank that committee. I know y'all met several times, about every week for probably the last month and a half. A lot of hard work went into that, so I thank you for your diligence on that matter. Resolution 1795 is a resolution to adopt a preliminary agreement regarding management of the yet-to-be-named Civic Plaza and authorize the county mayor to enter into written agreements for the payment of reimbursable or management fees, policies, and rules and regulations to establish the duties by and between third parties in Montgomery County for the daily operation thereof. Any questions? Commissioner Redd.
Yeah, this would be for the county attorney again. How broad and how narrow is this resolution? How much can the mayor enter into? And is this giving him the ability to make expenditures without the commission's vote on it?
Within budget, yes.
How much?
Within the budget for the current Civic Plaza.
And how much is the budget?
Well, okay. I'm sorry, I'd have to defer on how much, if there hasn't been anything specifically occurring in the, I don't know if the budget's broken down specifically into operations and maintenance and those issues, but it would have to be within the approved budget.
I think I may could, and Jeff may have to help me. I think it was $30,000 in the budget, and that was for advertising, startup money, maybe to buy some equipment for people to use at the park.
Okay, when you say the budget, you're just talking about the budget for the proposed plaza or the
Yeah,
plaza.
I mean, I
to
can't,
be named plaza.
I can't go out and take
Okay,
money
I
from the
just
sheriff's
wanted-
department and spend up, yeah.
I understand. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
the resolution.
That is the wall.
The resolution doesn't say within the plaza budget.
Well, I think we as a department, any department is bound by the budget, and anything above and beyond that budget has to come back to this body for approval.
Okay.
Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. Would the employee costs that are down there for the management of the plaza be included in that 30,000?
No, no. There is as part of our budget, we had an event planner, and that salary is not included in that 30,000. The 30,000 above and beyond.
Where would that event planner's salary or
It would
employee
be
cost
in
be
the
attributed?
PIO budget, the public information officer's budget.
So that's increased for next year because of
the salaries.
Right.
Correct. Correct.
Wouldn't it be simpler and more concise to have that attached to the plaza?
Well, I think ultimately what this agreement is really all about is to for county government not to be involved in the day-to-day operations of that, but because of quite frankly, where TRC was at the point when we put our budget together, and we've got this, what I think is a dynamic facility coming online, we had to do some planning, do some events for it. So to me, we had to put it in our budget. Ultimately, yes, I think it should all go somewhere else, and it should be run by a nonprofit that we have oversight over.
That makes sense. I think it's our baby. We want to make sure it grows up properly. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 1795? Commissioner Johnson? No? Okay. Resolution 1796 is a resolution of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners authorizing lease of computers. I think that's with the school system, Mr. Grant. Any questions of Mr. Grant on that? And Commissioners, you'll see Resolution 1797, a resolution approving the abandonment of an easement for public utilities on a portion of Jim Johnson Road. Excuse me. The rules will need to be suspended to hear this. This is a matter that came to us, and it's somewhat urgent with the redevelopment of Jim Johnson Road as part of the LG project. Yes, sir, Commissioner Riccone.
To suspend the rules?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any questions on 1797? All right, thank you. Under our reports, nominating committee nominations, Chairman Nichols.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, we met this evening at 1730. The chairman of the county legislative body, Mayor Jim Durrett, was nominated to serve as chairman for a one-year term to expire September 18. Chairman Pro Tem of the legislative body, the committee nominated Larry Riccone to serve a one-year term to expire 2018. The investment committee, Joe Wyatt was nominated to replace Commissioner Larry Riccone for a two-year term to expire September 19. And Commissioner John Gannon was nominated to serve another two-year term to expire September 19. And that's the report, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Under county mayor nominations, judicial commissioner Kathy Claiborne, part-time employee, nominated to serve another one-year term expiring September of 18. On our county mayor appointments, the chaplain of the legislative body, Commissioner Joe Creek, appointed to serve another one-year term expiring September 2018. Port Authority, Carl Wilson, appointed to serve another three-year term, which will complete his term of 10 years, expiring of 2020. And the Regional Historic Zoning Commission, Gary Norris, appointed to serve another five-year term to expire September 2020. Those are the county mayor nominations and the appointments. Commissioners, you'll see under your report, under the reports filed, the Highway Department, the road list that will need approval by the commission. Any old business? Just a few announcements. Excuse me, for those of you riding the van to the TCCA regional meeting at Paris Landing on Thursday, please meet in the parking lot by 4:15. The van will pull out no later than 4:30. Each of you are invited to an open house at EMS Station 31 on Tuesday, September 12th at 4:30 p.m. Location is 2915 Pace Road, and the station is at the corner of Pace Road and Highway 12. You also have on your desk an invitation to the legislative reception on September 26th. If you would, please make plans to attend that meeting. And on October the 2nd at 5 p.m. prior to the informal meeting, the legislative subcommittee of the Charter Commission would like to hold a meeting in the commission chambers to give you an opportunity to provide thoughts and recommendations as they move forward. So that's Monday, October 2nd at 5 o'clock in the conference room across the hall. The Charter Commission subcommittee, legislative subcommittee, would like to meet with the commissioners. Just something that's not on your agenda, two quick things. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we'll be accepting donations for bottled water, for canned goods that don't require a can opener, for diapers and sanitary wipes. These are immediate needs in the Texas-Houston area. They'll be accepted at 635 Frosty Morn Avenue, which is right over off of Craft Street. And lastly, Chief Edwards, if you're still here, I know you have 3 guys that are coming back from Texas right now. We want to certainly wish them safe travels and just appreciate the work that they've accomplished while they were down there. I know their first day down there, I think they saved 2 lives in a swiftwater rescue. So thanks to you and your bunch for all you do. And then finally, Commissioners, if we keep our entire Fort Campbell community in your thoughts and prayers. Command Sergeant Major Noah Foster left us over the weekend, and we just ask that you keep his family in your prayers, but also the entire Fort Campbell community. With no further business, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.